G'day folks, if you've been watching the channel for a while, you'll be aware that I'm more than just a wargamer. I play lots of different types of games. Some of my favourite games, Cooper Island for example, is a Euro game. I love Vitala games. I play lots of family games, card games with the kids and so forth. So I'm aware that many people identify as wargamers or grognards, and they restrict themselves just to wargames and even to particular publishers, MMP, Compass Games, G&T Games. And I wanted to take the opportunity to illuminate some other games that may be of interest to wargamers. So these are not games that I'd consider wargames, but that have thematic or mechanical elements that just might be of interest to you if you're a wargamer. I'm aware that for many years there have been discussions about whether or not a certain game is a wargame, and this game in particular, Twilight Struggle, was the focus of these discussions. When it came up to #1 on Board Game Geek's overall ranking, there were these fierce debates about whether or not it was a wargame. This is not featuring in my list. I don't want to talk about Twilight Struggle, but it's a game that certainly prompted my thinking around what to put on this list. This is not a ranked list either. This is just a list, a series of games, and I'll talk about why they may be of interest to the more traditional wargamer or grognard. Again, does not include Twilight Struggle. I'm not going to enter the debate about whether or not this is a wargame, but if this is of interest, then you might also be interested in 1989, Dawn of Freedom, and the first game on my list, 1960, The Making of the President. This has now been published by GMT. Now, I have the older version of the game. I have the, here we go, the Z-Man English 2nd edition here. This is mechanically very similar to Twilight Struggle and 1989 Dawn of Freedom. It is a card-driven game in the style of many other card-driven games, Paths of Glory, Here I Stand, Successes, etc. But it's focusing on the 1960 presidential election between Nixon and Kennedy. It is one of the relatively lighter card-driven games. I have played this game with my kids before they were teenagers, so it is a good introductory game to card-driven games. It's a good way to introduce people to the idea of card-driven games and some common sort of elements in those games. In this case, more closely related to Twilight Struggle and the idea of placing influence markers to control or dominate an area, but with some really interesting mechanical elements as well. So it's regarded as principally as a strategy game, but again, I think there are some elements here that will really interest people interested in card-driven games, Twilight Struggle, 1989, etc. So that's the first game on my list, 1960, The Making of the President. The second game is Freedom, the Underground Railroad. And this is published by Academy Games, designed by Brian Meyer. And look, game is actually sitting right behind me on the shelf. I was looking at it just the other day. It focuses on the Underground Railroad. It's a cooperative game for up to 4 players. You can play it solo very well. Works well with any play count. You work together as abolitionists, trying to help enslaved peoples in the South make their way to freedom in the North. And it's sort of card facilitated in a sense. You're principally looking at the map and trying to kind of manipulate the situations. There are, I think they're referred to as slave catchers, moving around these lines. So they'll move along these networks, trying to capture your enslaved people as they move north, and you are focused on distracting them and moving them around whilst you move people, principally to Canada. It's a really wonderful cooperative game, really interesting mechanics, a very polished design, looks really nice. You've got really great aesthetics on, that looks like a preview version. It looks like this. So it looks really wonderful setup and is a great gaming experience. You can see all the card aesthetics here. You will play as a particular personality with special abilities. Yeah, really fantastic game. And again, I think there are these mechanical elements here that kind of the point-to-point movement ideas, but the history as well is very evocative, which may appeal to many wargamers. For similar reasons, I'm also adding Hunt for the Ring to this list. This was published by Ares Games, and this is a hidden movement game where you play as Frodo's friends, companions. One player does, and the other players, up to 4 other players, play as the... Are they the Naz? They're not the Nazgul. They are the Nazgul. The Nazgul who try to hunt down the hobbits. So it's an area movement game, but it links with War of the Ring, which many would argue is a war game or thematic war game. So the idea that these link together is another one of the reasons why I've put this on the list. It has that point-to-point movement, and I know that's common in other hidden movement games, which I haven't added to the list. But this one in particular stands out for its link. Publication by Ares Game. The Middle-earth flavour appeals, I recognise, to many wargamers, and its direct links with War of the Ring. The outcome of Hunt for the Ring can be implemented in your next game of War of the Ring. You take certain counters from this publication and you include it into War of the Ring. So there are various sort of themes and ideas here that, again, I think might appeal to those thematic wargamers in particular. Okay. The next game is one that I've been playing lately. Some people regard this as a war game. I don't think it's a war game, but I'm not going to go into those debates. It's more a thematic game. You're playing as president and you're managing domestic and international affairs. There is, one small aspect of this game where you do go to war, where you implement the effects of a war, but it's something like 4% of total gameplay is resolving that war. So the other 94, 5, 6% of gameplay revolves around sort of managing politics and international relations and infrastructure and things like that. So that said, it has that kind of international intrigue element and the sense of building infrastructure that may appeal to many wargamers. Published by GMT Games, designed by Gene Billingsley, GMT production quality, very easy to get into. I've talked about this a lot recently, but it just has those sort of interwoven elements that, including the military aspect of things, and special ops and intelligence that may appeal to many wargamers. You do have abstracted military forces on the map, and again, you are waging wars with those forces, but it's such a small part of what you're doing. I don't think that in itself is enough to appeal, but it's everything coming together has the potential to appeal to wargamers. So that's why this is on the list. The next game is Pax Prem. This is a Colwell design by Watergate Games. It's this is a really intriguing game. I love the look of this game. It looks amazing. And it very nearly made my list of top 10 wargame maps. I thought, well, it's not a war game, and the map itself, without all these markers on it, is pretty bland. And I thought, well, will it make the top 10 non-war game maps? And again, I thought, well, the map itself, it's a cloth map. It has nothing on it until you start placing pieces on it. It's the pieces, the components themselves that make this look really interesting. What these represent are military forces when they're standing upright, and when they're laid down like this, they represent road connections between areas. And then gameplay revolves around these cards, where there's a lot of, again, you're kind of building infrastructure, building your relationships, engaging in intrigue, and securing alliances and forces and key personalities, warlords, to your side. There is a sort of an abstracted military aspect to this. You do have the military forces on the map, but gameplay really revolves around careful card play and manipulation and things like that. That said, again, it's not regarded as a war game. It's regarded as a strategy game, but it does feel, it is based on military campaigning and maneuvering in Afghanistan in the late 19th century, late 19th century, from memory, 1880s. I think I could very well be wrong there. But yeah, it has that feel, quite different gameplay to many other war games, but has that feel of waging a war of almost intelligence and diplomacy in Afghanistan. Now, you could say the same for many of the other sort of Pax style of games. They're all Pax Porfiriana, for example. They all have that similar gameplay, but Pax Pamir in particular, and Pax Porfiriana I could probably put right alongside this. It's a very similar game, but Pax Pamir, with the use of that map, gives that visible element to, you've got armies on the map, and again, just more strongly conveys the manoeuvring that's taking place compared to Porfiriana or any of the other Pax style of games. The next game is Scythe. Now, this is not a war game. There is conflict, but it is primarily an engine building game. You will win or lose this game based on how well you build your engine. I've played many games of this, and the people who go out and build a big force of mechs and try to wage war almost always lose this game. That's because they lose the focus on their engine and securing victory points. That's okay. If you want to go out and wage war and have big fights with your mechs, have fun, go at it. But it's not really what this game is about. It's not how you sort of win this game. That said, those mech elements and the idea of strengthening your mech and giving them sort of enhanced abilities and movement rates and so forth may appeal to some of the, again, the thematic wargamers among you. It does have that feeling of, many of those thematic games with this sort of mechanical engine. When I say mechanical engine, sort of an action enhancement building, if that makes sense. You'll start the game with sort of a series of 4 actions available, and over the course of the game you'll build your engine by enhancing the potential of those actions, and that's really core to gameplay. The person who maximizes their abilities the best, and it can be including enhancing your power to build mechs or enhancing the power of your mechs, that can be part of your engine, but that will really determine who wins the game. So yes, I'm mentioning this because with that huge caveat that it's not a war game and it is principally an engine building game, but there are those elements, those kind of war-like elements that many traditional gamers may be interested in. Many, I know, have been turned off by the lack of war, the lack of conflict in this game, or the futility of conflict. As I said, people who go out and wage war will very often lose this game. So yeah, that's Scythe for you. It is well worth checking out. It's a very interesting game, but just don't be disappointed, or be prepared for a lack of a viable path to victory if you're just focusing on war. Now, Twilight Inscription, I've done a recording of Twilight Inscription on the channel, and again, this plays very well solo. It can play from 1 to 8 players according to these polls. I wouldn't play it with probably any more than 4 because it'd be a very long downtime. But there is, basically you've got 4 boards that you're managing. And this board in the bottom left corner is your military board. And so it's got a sort of abstracted military component to it. It's a 4X style of game. You explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. Is that what the other X stands for? But you've got sort of resource management, exploration. It's got that 4X kind of elements to it. And I know I don't want to mention too many 4X games, but there's something about Twilight Inscription in the resource management and bringing all this together. The fact that you're building ships, I just thought it was really a really unique. It's a roll and write game, but very different to any other roll and write game I've ever played. Quite heavy compared to other roll and write games, with a 3.21 rating out of 5. It is based on the Twilight Imperium kind of universe. And again, I haven't mentioned games like Twilight Imperium on my list because they're a genre of their own. But there was something special about this that I wanted to bring to the attention of, again, that group of thematic wargamers among you. If you're a fan of Twilight Imperium or Space Empires 4X, then you may be interested in Twilight Inscription. Or if those 4X games don't interest you because of the miniatures on the map and you don't like those kind of games, this still has a potential to appeal to you because there are no miniatures. It is just you are focused on your board and managing your resources, your exploration, expansion to other planets, and your military affairs, all on this board. And you can play it solo, and again you focus on your own resources and what you're doing. So again, I thought Twilight Inscription may be of interest to wargamers. The next one is Watergate. Now again, this is sort of in the genre of card-driven games. This is focused on the Washington Post's investigation into the Watergate scandal. You've basically got, as the description says here, one player is Washington Post journalist, the other is the Nixon administration, and you are both playing your hand of cards. Here we go, and trying to kind of advance your position and bring out the evidence. And that's kind of an abstract way to explain this, but hand management, action management, much like you do in a card-driven game. And you're playing this little mini game on this sort of pinboard where you're trying to link witnesses or testimony or evidence to Nixon. The journalists are trying to make these connections. The Nixon administration is trying to block this and censor things and cut things out and remove the evidence, all this kind of stuff. So it has that mechanical feel and flavour of many card-driven games in the tensions you face when you're managing your hand of cards. You've got this sort of almost a network management. You're trying to forge these links on this pinboard, but all within the theme of Watergate. This really surpassed my expectations. It didn't look like much. It comes in a really small box. It was like a 40, 50 Australian dollar game. So what's that, maybe 20, 25 US dollars. But it was a wonderful experience. You can see my rating here, 8.5. I played a friend's copy, so I don't have my own copy, but it was so good that I kind of, I may still get my own copy because it's just we play this. When we set this up, we play it and we play it again, and we can get 2, 3, 4 games back to back in a single sitting because it only takes 30 to 60 minutes to play, and we finish one game and want to set it up straight away. So it has a lot of that kind of card-driven tension in a Watergate setting. So again, maybe a lot of interest to gamers, wargamers. The next one is Spirit Island, and again, this is a strategy game, and it's cooperative. In effect, you are playing as an island god, and you are playing with other players, or solo. You can play with 1 to 4 players. And as an island god, you have special powers to manipulate the situation on this map. And it may be, basically you've got European powers coming to colonize your island, and you need to scare them away. And you do that by having earthquakes, which might destroy their infrastructure, or a volcano erupts, which causes lava to flow and kills their soldiers. So it's you working with your sort of other gods, other players, to fight against this AI-driven invader. And it is one of the best co-op games. I've mentioned this on the channel before, but I haven't done a playthrough of it. It is technically, I guess, a Euro game or a thematic game, but the idea that you're waging, in a sense, this war against the Spanish conquistadors or the English or the French or whatever, gives it, may have that appeal. There is that historical theme there with this, you playing the role. I'm trying to find some image here. That's the fear that you generate to enhance your powers. That's an image of a larger map. Here's what it really looks like. This looks like maybe a 1 or 2 player setup. I'm trying to find, here we go. Here's a god card down here. So here are your powers that you power up and utilize. But you need to work together, and it just, it's a wonderful game for a start. Great for, I'd even argue great for non-gamers, a good introductory game. But you really have to work, ignore the waiting. It is much easier than that waiting suggests. This is all relative, of course. But again, I guess it has that feel and the mechanical flavour that may appeal to many wargamers. And again, I keep saying I'm not going to add too many 4X games to this list, but Second Dawn for the Galaxy really stands out in particular. And what I really want to highlight, it's a 4X game. You explore, you expand, you exploit the resources on these lands, and you exterminate. I think that's what the 4X stands for. But what I really like about this is the incorporation of technologies as a basis for ship upgrading, and you are shaping your military strategy around those technologies. So you'll have a technology board. Let's see if this image will cover it. Don't think, oh, here it is, up here. You'll have a technology board. You will purchase technologies from here. You'll place them on your ships, and you'll upgrade your ships with missiles or shields or engines to increase your initiative and all this kind of stuff. So you will create a very tailored military force. You've then got to build those ships, of course, and send them out. But it creates really unique circumstances that give this game just a flavour quite unlike any other 4X game. And again, I thought I'd mention this because that particular aspect of the military technology sort of system might appeal to many gamers. The next game is interesting because it is very much technically a war game, very low on the list, with not a great ranking, but I brought this out to play with my son just the other night. This is a fascinating, quite abstract war game. One player plays as the French military forces in Madrid in 1807. The other player plays as a sort of small force of Spanish militia and a mob. The reason I mentioned this game is because a lot of people don't recognise it as a war game. You can see here it's a blend. What's the voting system? Let's see how people have. Nope, that won't do it. Strategy war game. Let's see the poll. So 61% of people say war game, 31% say strategy game, but not a lot of votes. It's quite an abstract game. You could even call this an abstract game. I wonder if anybody has called it. Yeah, 4 people have called this an abstract game with a military theme over the top, this idea of a Spanish rebellion against the French in Madrid. Hidden orders, a small map. Okay, so you're looking at this pretty small map, an A4 size piece of paper. But again, it's just that it's almost like an area control war game, thinking along the lines of Storm over Stalingrad, Breakout Normandy and the like, but on a really small grid and with hidden orders. And yeah, I think it's escaped a lot of people's radars. So I want to mention this to flag it as a game that would really be of interest. I think this game is very good. I've rated it an 8 out of 10. Lightweight rating, fairly easy to learn. Card facilitated, so you'll have a deck of cards, as you can see down here, which adds special benefits, which are really cool. Yeah, worth checking out if you haven't come across that before. In a really small box as well. It comes in like a A5 sized box, so really small and kind of just deceptive in aesthetics and so forth. The next one, again, is very interesting. Now, this is Age of Empires 3 Age of Discovery, which has been republished in 2015 as Empire's Age of Discovery. Now, this is interesting. Okay, it is I have this copy here, so I'm going to show this. It is technically a worker placement game. You will place your workers on these rows to implement actions, and it's things like sending out missionaries to the New World, or sending out soldiers, or I can't remember what else, explorers, I think. And you will go out and you'll construct buildings to enhance your capabilities. It's a worker placement game with this area control mechanic, but you're also engaging in wars. There's fighting going on. And I guess it's such an interesting blend of mechanics, worker placement, area control. There's the fighting going on. I wanted to add this to the list again because I thought this, for those who hadn't come across this game before, it might appeal again to those sort of thematic wargamers rather than the traditional wargamers. So that's Age of Discovery. The next one, quite interesting. I have done a gameplay of this on the channel, which look, this looks ugly to a lot of people. I know it. It's heavy, so let's check out the weighting of this. 4.52. It's a very heavy game, and it's about you creating species to populate the Earth with. And you'll enhance the capabilities of your species. You may give them fins, or you may give them antenna, and you may give them, they may become cannibals or whatever. And you create these really unique species of animals, basically. And you may be thinking, well, how is this in any way a war game? Because much like as I described with Eclipse, what you're effectively doing here is enhancing the ability of your species to survive in many diverse ways. I mean, there's this huge deck of cards that comes out, and the cards filter through, and you pick the capabilities you want to add to your species and so forth. I'm trying to find a good image to capture some of the stuff going on. That's not it either. That's not what it looks like at all. Yeah, so you'll populate the Earth with your species, and effectively you are waging a sort of survival war against every other species on the planet. Almost in a sort of area control style of thing. Survival of the fittest. You've got predators and prey, top half and bottom half. So these are probably, carnivorous snails, and these are herbivorous snails in this image here, surviving. And it's basically you're trying to ensure that your species populate the planet and survive everything that other players and the world throws at them. I'm probably not selling this very well, but it's a really fascinating game. Really, really interesting to make these decisions about what you do with your species and how they survive. And again, these snails here, these are both species of snails, but one is clearly a predator and one is clearly a prey. So somebody has decided, okay, my snails are going to have teeth or venom or whatever, and this person has decided, okay, my snails are going to develop a hard shell and they're going to have to try and survive. So yeah, you are crafting your species as a kind of machine to survive this environment, and then you're spreading them out around the world, sort of area control like, to win the game. And again, that's that mechanics that I thought would be interesting. Okay, many of you are probably familiar with Civilization or Advanced Civilization. Recently republished as Mega Civilization. This is really interesting again. It is not a war game. It's described as a strategy game. There is a huge trading element, which is sort of central. You trade, you collect resources based on the number of cities you have on the board, and you trade these resources to collect more resources, to collect sets, to buy technologies, to enhance your civilization's ability to do certain things, all while sort of, there's not a huge kind of conquest element to this. It looks, yes, there's a huge map of, wow, Europe and Asia, but wars are a part of this, but I would put trade as the central, most important mechanic here. The military system here, the conquering system, is really quite easy. It's 1-for-1 removal of forces. So if you invade a neighbouring area, you remove 1-for-1 until only one person is left standing, pretty much. But it's got so many interesting elements behind this, the diplomacy, the negotiations that take place, the trading and the bluffing, and again, just I guess the complexity as well. So here are some of the interesting new. Oh, these are the calamities that occur. Here are the these are the technologies that you develop. Where are the trade goods? They're here somewhere as well. But yeah, you collect these trade goods, exchange them, and it has that kind of really epic feel that, again, may appeal to many gamers. It's a huge game. As you can see, playing time here is 6 to 12 hours. I would say that both the min-max there are probably underestimates. If you can play a game in 6 hours, that's quite remarkable. If you can finish a game in 12 hours, that's probably a lower estimate. Probably looking at more like 12 to 24 hours of gaming to complete a full game with 5, 6, 7 people. You can see here it plays from 5 to 18 players, so a big game. The next one, and again I've done a playthrough, or maybe it was a review of this on the channel. It's Fall of Rome by Z-Man Games, and this uses the pandemic system as a foundation to the idea of Rome fighting off barbarians. So if you've played Pandemic, basically you are epidemiologist or a scientist or an engineer, doctor, fighting off a pandemic as it spreads around the world. They've taken that idea and said, okay, well, now you're a Roman general fighting off barbarian tribes as they try to invade your territory. And I'm not a big fan of Pandemic. I am a big fan of Fall of Rome. I rated it 7.5. The system ports very well to this historical setting and idea. I don't know why it works, but it just does. It really immerses you in this idea that Rome is assailed on all sides by these barbarians. And you need to rally your troops and move them around. Who have you got here? You've got the Vandals, Visigoths, can't zoom in any further, Anglo-Saxons, Franks, Ostrogoths. You place your legions here. It's quite a simple system. So if I can look at the complexity here, it's probably going to be overestimated. 2.44 seems about fair. Relatively light to mid-weight Euro game, strategy game. But again, you are creating legions, building legions, maneuvering your legions to stop these invading groups on the borders of Rome. And yeah, it's a real challenge. So check it out. Put aside your thoughts about Pandemic. You're waging these wars on the frontier, effectively, in a fairly straightforward, easy to learn system. The next one I've spoken about quite a bit on the channel, High Frontier for All. Not a war game, described as a thematic and strategy game. You are building spaceships to go into space, to build factories on asteroids and moons and planets, to enhance your industrial capacity in space, to build even better space components to go and do more things like that. So there's no real war-like element to it at all in the base game. There are modules that add conflict, but really here I'm just talking about the base game. And the base game has the kind of the tension and heavy decision making that I know a lot of heavy wargamers will enjoy. No armies, no hex-to-hex movement, no military forces in the base game, but very high level of complexity. And I think a lot of heavier wargamers will enjoy the kind of deep and satisfying decisions that you're making here. You are developing, a strategy for your industrial plans, and you really have to do some complex calculations and planning to see this through to fruition. So I guess for me, it's akin to the sort of logistical considerations that you're making in some of those heavier games like OCS or the 1914 series, Serbin Musturbin and the like. You're planning things out, you're planning your resources and implementing that plan. And I just thought I wanted to mention this because I feel like it could be of interest to some of those who like logistics and planning in their games. The next one is Nemos War. War is in the title, and it is about a war, but it's regarded as a thematic game. It's published initially by Victory Point Games. They've published Galacta and Victory Point Games. You are the captain of the Nautilus, and you sail around the world and you seek to, various things. Generally, you're hunting and destroying enemy ships as a large part of the game. It's been a while since I've played this. There is a playthrough of this on the channel. Great. I think it's solo. I've only ever played it solo. 1 to 4 players, so you can play it with other people. I don't know what the 2, 3, 4 player game is like, but it works really well as a solo game, And it has that kind of military element to it, the combat element to it. There's a lot of combat going on. You've got missions or goals that you're trying to achieve. But again, it's a game that stands out as you can see all these enemy forces sort of assailing you. Been too long for me to be able to comment on the details, but yeah, not regarded as a war game, but certainly has that warlike element to it. The next one is Oath. And I was talking about this recently on the channel for its really beautiful map art. This is effectively an area control game with various paths, various and evolving paths to victory. But it could be the game that, I guess, mid-weight area control like gamers like to play. Something along the lines of, again, Storm over Stalingrad, Breakout Normandy, that type of idea, but in a really abstract Eurogame thematic style. It is a legacy game, so the deck will evolve over time. The winner of each game gets to sort of shape the deck for the future. So unlocking new cards, things like that. So there's a lot of conflict in this game, a lot of fighting. You're fighting for control of these areas. It's all kind of really unusually abstracted, but I mention this again because, again, it has that feel that I think would appeal to a lot of those mid-weight gamers. And the last one that I want to mention is Stronghold. So this is, again, I mentioned this recently, a siege situation, fundamentally though Eurogame. But again, the fact that it revolves around a siege is a theme that I think a lot of historical gamers will really love. Don't be sort of, it's not a war game. You're really managing your resources and production and kind of looking for strategies to exploit your opponent's forces. You can see, no mention of a war game here. Let's see how people have voted. A couple of people think it's a war game, 15%, but the vast majority say it's a strategy game. So this is the original version, and then it was upgraded to this second edition in 2015 where they revised the map art, and it looks something like that. So worth checking out. So folks, again, not a tiered list. There are a lot more games that I chose not to add to this list. These are my main recommendations based on my experience. But as always, if there's something that you think I've missed, something that you'd really like to put out there, please leave a comment below. I've tried consciously to try to minimize the number of sort of 4X and games like Game of Thrones or Inish or Shogun, things like that. I've tried to minimize them. I've made a few sort of mentions of similar games like Eclipse and Age of Discovery and the like that I think are probably most relevant. But if you think there's something that I should really mention, please leave a comment below. Thanks everyone for watching, and take care.